very much for inviting me today. Well, I don't have maybe so much experience as Professor shared with us, but I hope some of you might find my presentation and the topic of my presentation interesting and inspiring too. So let's find out. As it has been already mentioned, I am going to talk about cross-linguistic influence in third language acquisition, which is English, by Polish learners. I would like to start with some basic definitions concerning my topic. The term cross-linguistic influence is understood as the influence of a person's knowledge of one language on that person's knowledge or use of another language. You are probably familiar with the term transfer, which was introduced in 1970s, but the term cross-linguistic influence is a kind of umbrella term for transfer, but also interference, borrowings, omission, or also aspects of language loss. The second important term to clear is language acquisition and the symbols L1, L2, L3. There are different criteria to classify the languages. Of course, the most common is to classify the languages by the order of acquisition. Then the mother tongue would be then L1. Next language acquired after mother tongue would be L2, and so on. But there is also a possibility to name languages by the language dominance. Then L1 would be probably also our mother tongue, but then L2 would be the second dominant language, and then L3 the third dominant language. And this is also the pattern I followed in my research, so I will come back to that later while discussing my study. And there are some models of third language acquisition which indicate in what way the languages can have impact on each other. The most discussed models are cumulative enhancement model, L2 status factor model, typological primacy model, and linguistic proximity model. I would like to present shortly the assumptions of these models. So according to cumulative enhancement model, language learning is cumulative. So all languages known can potentially influence the development of subsequent learning. Other languages known can enhance subsequent language acquisition. So according to this model, only positive influence is possible. According to L2 status factor model, secondary languages will be preferred as transfer source in case of L3 acquisition, and both facilitative and non-facilitative transfer is possible. According to typological primacy model, typological proximity or even psychotypology, so how the learner perceives languages, is the most important factor for cross-linguistic influence. Influence from all prior languages is possible, and both facilitative and non-facilitative impact is possible. According to linguistic proximity model, structural similarity plays the most important role. So cross-linguistic influence occurs when a particular linguistic property in the L3 input reveals abstract structural similarity with linguistic properties of the previously learned languages. Also, influence from all prior languages is possible, and both facilitative and non-facilitative impact is possible. For a better overview, let's look at the table with the summary of the models. We can see that there are differences between all the models concerning transfer source, facilitative or non-facilitative transfer, or property by property or wholesale transfer. None of the proposed models has been fully confirmed, so the question of L1 versus L2 influence is still under investigation. And that is why I became interested in this topic. And the main objective of my study is to identify evidence for cross-linguistic influence and to determine to what extent the previous languages affect L3 acquisition, especially syntax. I am going to present one part of my doctoral research. And the participants were all Polish students of applied linguistics at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań. Their language constellation is the following. They had Polish as their mother tongue, then German is their dominant language, specified as L2, and English is their weaker language, specified as L3. Language dominance is indicated in terms of overall proficiency, the length of learning the languages, and frequency of use in the given languages. There were 15 students in their first year and 11 students in their third year of studies. Such selection of participants gives the opportunity to see the differences between the language proficiency levels in those groups. The participants were tested by the grammaticality judgment and correction task. And concerning the investigated structures, as my research focuses on syntax, there were 3 structures investigated: relative clauses, modals with adverbs of manner, and indefinite article. So in this task, in grammaticality judgment and correction task, students saw sentences appearing on the computer screen written in students' third language, English. The sentences included the investigated structures, but also some fillers as distractors. There were both correct and incorrect sentences included in the study. As we can see in the example, the book that I yesterday read was very exciting, which is incorrect, or the correct sentence, he is the man who I saw in the restaurant. The sentences appeared on the screen one by one. Students read the sentence and were asked to judge under time pressure whether the sentence is grammatically correct or incorrect. At the end of the experiment, all the sentences judged as incorrect were shown on the screen again, and the students were asked to correct them. This technique ensures that the participants reject the sentence for the reason relevant to the study. The chosen grammatical structures vary between every language per Polish, English, Polish, German, and English, German. And such selection allows to distinguish between influence from L1 and L2. So there are research questions which I address in this study, and these are the following. The first research question: do both languages contribute to cross-linguistic influence in third language acquisition, or is one of them chosen as the source of influence? Secondly, which model of third language acquisition is the most appropriate? Third question, has language proficiency impact on the strength and direction of cross-linguistic influence? And fourth question, are the syntactic structures under investigation differently affected by cross-linguistic influence or not? And let's move probably to the most interesting part, so the results. After rejecting the sentences which couldn't be included in the study, for example, they were omitted by the student, these 2 tables show the results of 2 groups, first year and third year students. I would like to draw your attention first to this division correct versus incorrect sentences. Let's look at the first table. Concerning the investigated structure indefinite article, there were 58 correct sentences included in the study, and all of them were judged properly by the participants. This is also the case for adverbs and relative clauses. All or almost all correct sentences were judged properly. However, concerning incorrect sentences, we can observe that, for example, out of 57 incorrect sentences with indefinite articles, only 12 were recognized by the participants as incorrect. Then 30 out of 57 sentences, including adverbs, were judged properly, and 46 out of 60 sentences with relative clauses were judged properly. So there is a significant difference in judging correct and incorrect sentences. The situation is similar in the second table, so by the third-year students. Almost all correct sentences included in the study within all investigated structures were judged properly. Concerning incorrect sentences, 7 out of 39 with indefinite articles, 16 out of 44 with adverbs, and 29 out of 42 with relative clauses were judged properly. In conclusion, answering the research questions, analyzing the results in the light of cross-linguistic influence, it is possible that with an indefinite article and adverbs, the participants don't recognize the incorrect sentence in English because of the non-facilitative influence from Polish. Within relative clauses, the participants don't recognize the incorrect sentences in English because of the non-facilitative influence from German. So answering question number 1, do both languages contribute to cross-linguistic influence? In that case, the answer is yes. So not only one language, but both of them. Comparing the results to the assumptions of L3 acquisition models, we can suppose that the results give support for the linguistic proximity model. So structural similarity, or sometimes perceived structural similarity, plays the most important role, not the typology or L2 status. Of course, more research is needed to confirm this hypothesis. Answering the third question, there are no significant differences concerning the language proficiency in both groups. It could have been one of the factors, but in this study, it didn't turn out to be so. And when it comes to the syntactic structures, first of all, the correctness rate in judging the correct sentences is higher than by judging incorrect sentences, and it was in both groups. And what's more, within the investigated structures, indefinite article had the lowest correctness rate also in both groups. I would like to finish my presentation with some implications for further research and implications for teachers and learners. Let me start with those for further research. Well, first of all, I want to mention that I presented only one part of my doctoral research. So I would like to emphasize that my project also consists of two groups, two Polish learners groups. One of them is with the dominant German language, and the second one with dominant English language. And I would also, I want to emphasize that my project provides for two research tasks. So not only grammaticality, judgment and correction task, but also a site translation task, which is about language production. And taking all that into consideration, first of all, I want to say that research into third language acquisition is significant to develop the field of multilingualism and to learn more about processes while acquiring a language. Secondly, none of the proposed models of third language acquisition has been fully confirmed, so further research is needed to settle which model is the most appropriate. What's more, investigation of different language constellations, because every language constellation will help to gain an insight into the topic of cross-linguistic influence. What's more, different types of tasks, so focusing on both, not only processing the language, but also, as I've mentioned, language production. And variety of investigated structures. There are more studies within lexis or phonology when it comes to cross-linguistic influence, so research on syntax is especially welcome. And I would like to move to implications for teachers and learners, because actually more and more people are now multilingual, and that is why they are also interested in learning new languages. I think that is also why research of cross-linguistic influence can be important for learners and teachers, because they want to understand the language acquisition processes. Considering this difference between correct and incorrect sentences I've presented, it might be useful to introduce such kind of tasks into the classroom. This is a simple advice, but find the mistake and correct it would be one of the suggestions for the teachers to introduce such tasks into the classroom. Secondly, Professor was talking about raising the awareness of multilingual teaching, and I would like to emphasize the same. So being aware of the fact that cross-linguistic influence exists, it would be great to make the students aware of that too. And what's more, show similarities, but also differences between languages. The participants of my study filled in the questionnaire, which consisted of some statements concerning language acquisition. And in conclusion, I want us to look at 3 of them. I learn every new language in the same way. 14 out of 26 participants agreed with the statement. 5 answered, I don't know, and only 7 participants didn't agree with that statement. In the same time, which is interesting, all the participants agreed with the statement that the similarities between languages facilitate acquisition of another language. And the third statement, German doesn't help while learning English, 13 out of 26 students think that, yes, German doesn't help while learning English. 7 answered, I don't know. But after my presentation, for example, in case of indefinite article, it might be, though, useful to recall the previous knowledge, and German might help here in this area while learning English. But we have to be aware of that. So that's also my point, to make your students aware of the similarities and differences. So to sum up, we are all students and for all our life. So I hope that my presentation was in fact referring to all of us. And thank you very much. And questions are welcome. Questions or suggestions?
Thank you very much for this informative and well-prepared, inspiring presentation. I guess it's really beneficial for us all to have insight into current research. Yes, maybe I will ask if there are any questions from our listeners. Mm-hmm. I can see there is something on our chat. Yeah.
Yarek Hoca raised his hand, by the way.
Okay, so let's start with our guest, and then yeah. I see there is a question from Arpita. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Aleksandra, for this wonderful presentation. I think it's very useful and very helpful. And I'm just wondering what your opinion is on this current, let's say, shift in European language policy, in which mediation across languages, L1, L2, or in fact L2, L1, has been given greater prominence. We can see this prominence, for instance, in the primary school leaving exam in a foreign language, where a clearly mediating task, interlingual mediation, L2 into L1, is actually quite a troublesome thing for students and for teachers who have been used to some kind of prohibition of L1 use for so many years. So I'm wondering what your opinion is on this current shift or current emphasis on mediation, and your opinion on the possible benefits of or drawbacks of such an approach.
Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, there used to be this trend of prohibiting, as you mentioned, the first language while learning another languages. But actually, as you've also mentioned, there are more and more exercises in which you should use both languages, or even all the languages you know. So I would say I also want to add, when it comes to cross-linguistic influence, they also, at the beginning, they were considered only into one direction. So let's say your L2 can influence your L3, and this is the only way, this is the only direction. But nowadays we are also aware of the fact that actually the cross-linguistic are have more directions. So also the language you are currently acquiring, let's say your L3, it can also somehow influence your L2 or even L1. Of course, I am not talking about like structures or something like that, but when it comes to learning strategies, culture, you are talking a lot about culture. So this is all connected. And actually, I must say my attitude to that exercises which connect all languages, my attitude is very positive, because nowadays actually these exercises, they show reality, I would say, because there are many situations in our lives. Let's say we are in another country, and there is someone from our family with us who doesn't speak this language, and this is actually this exercise which students sometimes get. Yeah, so you see the text in English, and now you have to translate it, or well, maybe not even translate, but you have to share, okay, what's the content of this text? You have to share it with your let's say your member of your family. So I would say I really I have really positive attitude to this kind of let's say mixing the languages, but in a good way. So thank you for that question.
Yes, thanks for that. I think it is also called translanguaging. That's another concept that most probably Aleksandra could give us another presentation on. Thank you, Aleksandra, for the talk and for the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more question from Arpita. It is on chat, but maybe Arpita, would you like to ask this question directly, or should I? Maybe I will read it. So how much Krashen's theory is relevant to today's online classes, and connection between Krashen and linguistics?
Okay, that is a very theoretical question. Well, do you want me to, I don't know, discuss maybe Arpita, do you want to ask a very specific question, or should I just ask very briefly? If you want to add any comments, then you can do it now. If not, then I will just answer briefly your question as I understand the question. Okay, maybe you don't want to speak in public.
Yeah, I think maybe
okay.
Maybe you can refer to well, sorry, there is one more. Okay, so I think just try to refer to your research and.
Yes. Okay. So answering that question, nowadays it is considered that actually it is connected with the last statement I put in my presentation. So I learn every new language in the same way. And as you could see, a lot of students answered yes to that question. So they have in mind that, okay, I learn a new language, so I do it in the same way. But there are a lot of research and theories which say that it is not true, because we do not learn next language in the same way. First of all, we know the division between, okay, first language, because this is a mother tongue, and then, okay, let's say foreign language, we learn it in a different way. But for example, Professor Hufeisen, she's from Germany, and there is a famous model when it comes to language acquisition, which say that actually we learn every new language in a new way. Even there are differences between the second language and between the third language and additional languages. Why? For example, let's imagine you learn your second language. Yeah, so you know your mother tongue, you start learning the second language. This is really the first language you acquired, which is not your mother tongue. But then when you start acquiring the third and additional languages, let's well, you have so much more language strategies for learning strategies, for example. You know what your motivation is, yeah? You know what is the best method for you to learn, yeah? So, and then if you learn every new language, then you get more and more experience. And I would say this is the main, these are the main differences. So I advise you also to look at this model. This is Professor Hufeisen, and she writes a lot about it. And that's also, yeah, quite interesting to see the differences between acquiring another language and another language. So